Thanks for joining this NoWeedIllinois.com presentation. No Weed Illinois opposes the legalization of today's high-potency marijuana. State lawmakers could act on legalization legislation as early as January. We are encouraging viewers like you to call their state lawmakers and kindly ask them to vote no on marijuana. The state capitol switchboard number is 217-782-2000. Over the last few weeks, we've been speaking with a variety of experts on marijuana, but for this presentation, we want to get a little bit more personal. We're joined by Aubree Adams. Ms. Adams is a resident of Colorado, a state that legalized marijuana 5 years ago. She's affiliated with Moms Strong, Parents Opposed to Pot, and the Marijuana Victims Alliance. Ms. Adams, why do you consider yourself to be a victim of marijuana? Tell us the story of how marijuana was a gateway to other drugs that almost killed your son and impacted you and your family.
Well, let me start my presentation here, and thank you for the opportunity of sharing my story. I really appreciate the platform. And can you see my presentation up?
Yes, we see the first slide here, yes.
Okay. I am very grateful for this opportunity because we don't get this opportunity much. You don't hear from the people that have lived through the legalization of marijuana. So I'm here to tell you how it's changed my home. I'm from Pueblo, Colorado, and we're known as the Napa Valley of marijuana. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I have roots in Illinois, Southern Illinois. My grandparents grew up on dairy farms, and my grandmother was a single mom who raised 4 kids in the 50s and 60s when there wasn't a lot of resources and support for that. In 2005, I moved to Pueblo, Colorado, to live near my mom, to raise my kids, and of course, because I fell in love with Colorado. It's an absolutely beautiful state. When I moved to Colorado, marijuana was not even a topic of conversation. We were never exposed to it. We never smelt it. But things have changed now. Currently, for the past 20 years, I've worked as a physical therapist assistant, but I'm currently doing some contract work for Parents Opposed to Pot and America Against Legalizing Marijuana. And when we talk about the legalization of marijuana, we need to talk about protective factors and risk factors. We need to understand that the legalization of marijuana is a promotional policy. It is not a decriminalization policy. It's very important that the public knows the difference and is aware of between the two. Legalization means every home is a potential drug house, and it means shops in your neighborhood that sells high-potency marijuana in deceptive forms to disguise use. And our children are the victims of this. They are being bombarded by pro-pot propaganda. Because of what happened to my son and my community, I have become an advocate and an activist. I created a YouTube channel to give a voice to the citizens. I would go to press conferences where medical experts would tell the public about what is happening in the ERs and in the medical community and what the police were seeing with the organized crime coming into our communities. And that word wasn't being spread. And still to this day, it's very hard to get the truth out. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see over 80 videos of different testimonies, some experts on there, of teachers talking about using air fresheners in their classrooms to mask the smell of marijuana. You'll see me talk to homeless people. You'll see a family talk about how the marijuana smoke and smell comes into their yard and into their home. The condition of the people of Pueblo is very sad since they legalized marijuana. It was not like that when I moved there. All you have to do is take a trip to our Northside Walmart to see this. Because of my advocacy work, I was introduced to an organization called Moms Strong, and we tell our stories to unmask the marijuana charade. Both the founding moms of that unfortunately do not have their sons anymore. My son is still alive, and they asked me to be the third mom to give hope that recovery works and that we can find treatment with addiction and mental illness. Here's Parents Opposed to Pot. We asked that if everybody could like us on Facebook and Twitter, Mom Strong and Parents Opposed to Pot. Here's my son. My son was a normal kid. He had some anxiety, but he had a lot of support at school and at home. He was never required to take medication. The grooming stage with this marijuana movement came to him in the 7th grade. When they legalized marijuana, when the bill passed, he wrote 420 on his clothes and arms, and that was 2013. And as you can see, my son was a Cub Scout and soon a Boy Scout, and I was his Cub Master. My boys are sleeping in the top picture there. We would take trips up to the mountains to do hikes and fun stuff up there, and they always took a nap on the way back because it's a lot of fun. By 2014, the pot stores opened up in our town of Pueblo, Colorado, and my son was exposed to marijuana edibles at that time. His behavior was changing. He was becoming depressed. He was self-harming. We thought it was a normal reaction to adolescence and with a breakup with a girlfriend. We did not know at the time that he was using marijuana edibles because the industry makes these products in deceptive forms to disguise use. It's purposeful marketing to them.
They look like candy.
They look like candy, yep. And who doesn't like candy? This was the calm before the storm hit my family. This is between his 8th grade and 9th grade year. He had graduated 8th grade. I had graduated college. The bottom picture is of him and I at Universal Studios. We all took a trip there. The middle picture is him playing high school baseball. And that's his teacher, his tutor that he had since the 4th grade. They were always good friends and still are today. We call her our family's angel. He was toting around his little cousins. We took a trip to St. Louis too. We were at the St. Louis Zoo there. And because he was struggling so much, I thought a dog would help our family. So I went and got a dog, and there he is cuddling and sleeping with his dog. He was a normal kid. The storm hit us in his 9th grade year. It was apparent he was coming home stoned. He was getting in trouble at school. He had never gotten in trouble before at school. He was getting into fights. He was being suspended. He was arguing with me that marijuana was medicine and it was helping him. By February of 2015, my son was irrational. He was paranoid. He was perseverating on things that didn't make sense. He was crying a lot. He was inconsolable and very emotional and sometimes very angry. He had a break on a Friday night, and he attempted suicide. He took about 250 ibuprofen tablets. I was in denial, and I sent him to bed. The next morning, I found my son laying on the couch, saying, "Mom, I don't feel good. I don't want to go to baseball practice." And we found the empty bottle. We found the suicide note. And he was hospitalized for 5 days. When he got out of the hospital, he was still using marijuana, and he wasn't getting better. Within a week, I had him back in the ER again because he was still suicidal. The psych liaison at that time couldn't understand why I was so upset and said, "It's just marijuana" to me, and sent us home. Within a few days later, I was back in the ER with him again because his behaviors were not improving. He was still suicidal. And that evening, I begged the psych liaison for help. And he told me that I didn't get help a few days prior to being there because there were no available beds in our community of Pueblo, Colorado. He found a bed in a nearby town, Colorado Springs, which is about 30 miles north of us. And he was hospitalized for another 5 days.
Why weren't there any beds available?
We don't have the resources and the treatment, and my son wasn't the only one suffering. So we were already overloaded with problems that marijuana was causing our community. So that's a good point. If you're going to promote the stuff, at least have the beds available for the ones that fall prey to it. When he got out of the hospital the second time, I sat down with him and he told me, Mom, I was dabbing and I knew it was making me feel crazy. And I was actually trying to quit. And I was like, what's a dab? I had no clue what a dab was.
Right.
And he told me, Mom, it's like really strong marijuana. It's like crack weed.
Had you ever like searched your son's room for marijuana, that sort of thing? Or, were you surprised by his activity?
Well, it was an activity over time. It progressively, his behaviors started with self-harming. And then by the time he was really irrational, we were in denial. Not my kid syndrome we had. We did not know marijuana had changed so much. And we did not know marijuana could do this to somebody and change them so much to the point that they wanted it to end. These are pictures of dabs on the bottom, up to 99% THC. And then the one in the corner, the white crystals, is THCA crystalline. It's up to 99.9% THC. So I had to become educated about what they actually legalized and what was available. They mass produce these products in my town and call them medicine.
Up to 99% THC. And for those not familiar, THC is the additive, right, that gets you high.
Well, it's not an additive. It's a natural chemical in the marijuana plant.
Okay.
Yeah. It's what everybody's seeking to get that dopamine release that makes them feel high. I don't call it a high. I call it an impairment. I call them being stoned. It changed my son so much. It wasn't funny at all to me. No. So I don't call it a high. So this is how they smoke dabs. They use a blowtorch because they have to heat it up to a very high temperature. And they smoke it through a bong, and they call it a dab because a little dab will do you. They have a needle up here that they put just a little bit on the bong to heat it up. It's common for them to use masks to inhale as much of the THC smoke as they can, and they make masks and designs that are cartoon characters and Star Wars stormtroopers. That's the Predator. That
Well, those look kind of scary to me.
The kids are attracted to them. So most people who start dabbing usually vomit. It is so toxic. Most people vomit right away.
Let me ask you this: marijuana first, maybe meth, cocaine, and eventually heroin last. Do you believe that pot is a gateway drug? And if you say that to lawmakers here in Illinois, for instance, they'll almost laugh at you.
Well, not only is it true, and the science proves it, but what I witnessed it with my own child. Here we go. I just want to show you some products here. Jewels are available in the marijuana stores where the kids can pacify themselves and suck on them, and it just looks like a thumb drive. And then we have our vapes that they can vape nicotine or THC, or it's very common for them to use both. They can also act like they have an inhaler. These products are available in Colorado, and a lot of our teens are vaping. But those lawmakers that would laugh at a mom like me who would say that marijuana was my son's gateway drug, they can't get away with it with a mom like me. I have stood on the front lines of this movement. I have debated marijuana industry people. I have been surrounded in Vermont's capital with marijuana lobbyists where things were getting pretty tense and law enforcement was surrounding us, and I won't let them get away with that. That's a blatant lie, and that's why I call them legalizers.
They're legalizers. Are you finding that a lot of people do not speak out against marijuana for fear of ridicule and resistance from the marijuana industry, also the news media and even politicians.
Well, that is a very common theme. Some parents do start to speak out and then retreat because of the harassment and the bullying tactics and the threats that come to us. Also, some of the parents that have been on the front lines and have tried to go there, the marijuana proponents come after them so hard, calling them liars. I've had one father tell me, and his son died from a marijuana impaired driver. He said, I thought I was going to punch him out. I could not stand there another minute with them degrading my son and calling me a liar. It's really sad. I've had my moments where I've had to retreat, but this is a much needed and necessary movement that we need more people to speak out on. So I'll be speaking out on this till the day I die. This is such a wrong thing that has happened to our country, and not because of my son, but because of other kids and other families, and because the future of our country is at risk here. These are some of the products that are available in marijuana stores. You can see they took the Girl Scout cookie logo, and instead of the hair on the girls, they turned them to pot leaves. And they have Snoop Dogg on a marijuana cookie thing. Whoopi Goldberg has her products. Some of her products you're supposed to soak in the marijuana in a tub to treat your menstrual cramps, which is very scary because marijuana is a fat-soluble substance. It adheres to the fat in our bodies. That's why it adheres to our brains. Our brains are the fattiest organ we have. And it actually increases the risk for testicular cancer. And in males, it can enlarge the breast tissue in males. So the fact that Whoopi Goldberg is telling women to soak in this when we have a lot of fat content too, where it can adhere to that fat, is a very scary situation. We have Carlos Santana that comes to Pueblo, Colorado, and promotes his vape products. The packages that you're seeing here now, what the marijuana industry will do is they'll buy Cheetos, they'll open them up, they'll spray THC on the Cheetos and repackage them and call them Weedos. They do that with the Fruit Loops and then call it Wake and Bake. They promote these products to be used in the morning, noon, at night, anytime. They promote marijuana to be used 24 hours a day before you go to bed, when you wake up in the morning. And they've also done that with Pop-Tarts and call them Pot Tarts.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Back to these products with Snoop Dogg and Whoopi Goldberg. Has the FDA weighed in on any of these products?
I don't believe so. Not these products. I know they have sent some letters to some of the marijuana industry to tell them they need to quit making the false medical claims about it curing cancer and stuff like that. But I don't think there's been any follow through on it. I don't think they've said anything about the candies either. So, and that's a tragedy. There's no reason to have these candies whatsoever. The only reason why they have them is to attract the children. And here's a normalization, a way they attract the children. Here's a Girl Scout selling Girl Scout cookies. I believe that picture is from San Diego. But the other picture with the kid on the shoulders there, that's at the 420 celebration in Denver, Colorado, just this year. And he's surrounded in a haze of marijuana smoke. And that should be illegal. That child should not be exposed to that marijuana smoke. But nobody held anybody accountable for it. And so now he suffers the consequences. That child is the victim of this. And 420 is a marijuana holiday now. And now we're going to see more deaths on that day and the next day after, because they've made it into this drug holiday.
What about secondhand marijuana smoke? That was a big thing when they went after big tobacco, was the secondhand smoke. And they banned smoking in restaurants and public buildings here in Illinois, for instance. And are we going to give a pass to marijuana?
Well, they have. Pueblo County, where I'm from, actually was one of the first places in the nation to ban smoking in restaurants and in public places. And here we are, just completely take a turnaround where we are exposed to marijuana and smoke on a daily basis. I counted one time, my son and I were exposed 7 times in one day. You were driving down the road, they're smoking marijuana in front of you, the marijuana smoke comes into your car. I was in my son's 8th grade graduation. One of the parents either was smoking marijuana in the parking lot or had marijuana on them, and the whole gym reeked of marijuana. It almost ruined the whole celebration. I tried to not let it ruin my night, but it's a very tough situation that we have put our children in. And here's another big example of the deceptive marketing they have to the children. So in Pueblo County, we have pot scholarships. So they've taken the marijuana tax money. They've done this for 3 years now, and they've increased the revenue. It was started at $420,000, and now it's up to $700,000. And they give $1,000 to each high school senior. You don't have to qualify with good grades or anything. You just, as you're a Pueblo high school senior, you can get the $1,000. Then they match it with our tax money and give them $2,000. And for them to get that money, you have to stay in Pueblo and go to 2 of our schools. We have a junior college, Pueblo Community College, or to Colorado State University in Pueblo. And Sal Pace is our county commissioner, who has destroyed our town and has vomited this marijuana industry on us. And he was quoted as saying, "We want to try to ensure that the future of Pueblo is bright." Yeah, what he's doing is he wants to try to ensure future users. This is a way to market to the children, to normalize marijuana use so he has the future users so he can make money.
So is the marijuana industry kind of infiltrating schools, for instance, by sponsoring a booster club or a soccer team or anything like that? Is that happening?
I don't know if that's happened in the schools yet, but the 4-H club, we have the what do you call it? The state, I can't think of it, where they come and show that at the state
State fair?
fair. That's the one I was looking for. They put marijuana promotion products in the children's packages, so the children get it like a welcome package when they come show their animal or their craft, and they were able to infiltrate that. The education is lacking in Pueblo. I have brought people to Pueblo to educate the children because we didn't have any in the schools. I was told no by the city schools. I was able to get this one gentleman in some of the charter schools, but one of the high school teachers, when I called them on the phone and I said who I am and I have this national name coming in to talk to the children, he was so excited. He's like, "Oh, we need this so bad. It's such an issue." And then I was told that I could not do that. And our doctors have even tried to get into our schools to try to educate them, especially our ER doctors, of what they're seeing in the ER about the suicide rate increasing and stuff, and they were told no too. While they're promoting and they have these $700,000 weed money, Pueblo has the current highest use marijuana youth use in the state. Sorry, I said that wrong, but we have the highest rate. But we have our pot scholarships, and we don't have any treatment for them. 1 out of 3 of our seniors are current marijuana users in Pueblo.
But you were told when folks voted for this would be for folks 21 and over.
Yeah, but it's just like alcohol. If you promote it and you set up shops and you let every home have it, the accessibility is there. So you've increased this accessibility. Not only do we have most of our kids are using, we have chronic absentee rate is very high at 27.6%. That translates to 4,674 kids that are chronically absent from school. And the stats that I have up here are the kids being polled that are actually in school. So 1 out of 3 seniors, those were kids that were present in the school. It doesn't count the kids that are out of school. This is another way that the marijuana industry markets to our children and to our community. They go through every loophole they can. So all our Adopt a Highway sponsors signs have marijuana advertisement on them, every one of them in our county.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Here is a marijuana shop by one of our high schools. The Gold Academy is an alternative online program. So these are the kids that were having problems in the public school and decided to go to the Gold Academy to do an online program, and they go to their high school there to get help. So they walk up and they can see hundreds of bongs and pipes. They have advertisements on the front windows for recreational and medical marijuana. A lot of like clothing, bedding that you can see through the windows. And then out front here, they sometimes have a guy out there dressed in a banana suit with like a Bob Marley hat on or a Jamaican hat on. That says, come get your free pipes. And that's where the kids drive up and see that every day. And they're not allowed to have a marijuana shop right next to a high school, but it happens. This is the south side of Pueblo, Colorado. When people talk, push back on what I'm saying, they tell me, well, your son would have used anyways. He would have used anyways. And I said, okay, maybe he would have. Maybe he would have experimented with this. But he would not have had access to this crack weed. And legalizing marijuana made it more harmful because it's more potent, and it's allowed this marijuana industry, this culture, to come market to him. It also made it more accessible. This is our first round of sobriety. After he got out of the hospital the second time, my friend worked for the Department of Social Services, and she told me that my son would not get help for weed marijuana problems. But she said I had the right to volunteer my family for crisis intervention with the Department of Social Services. So I did. It took me quite a while to get a case open, but I did. And we had a therapist come into our home and talk with the whole family, educate the whole family. And my son did get better for a while. This is us on a hike at the reservoir. We have a beautiful reservoir. That's why the marijuana industry likes our community, because we have water compared to the rest of Colorado. But then fortunately my son relapsed and he moved on to meth and heroin. We were in the addiction of a cycle of addiction at this point. He was put in a residential treatment center in Denver, where he was put on Prozac and Abilify. And he was like a walking zombie. He was drooling. I'd show up and I'd find him sleeping in the hallways there. So not only is marijuana a gateway to other drugs, it's a gateway to prescription medication too.
Well, there are lawmakers here in Illinois who are suggesting that marijuana could be part of the answer to the opioid crisis.
Unfortunately, I don't mean to laugh. I know children that are dead because they believe that lie. I know 2 families that don't have their kids because they believe that. One of my son's current counselors was just talking to me last night about that, how his mom allowed him to smoke marijuana instead of the heroin. And he said it only took him about 2 weeks before he wanted that heroin again.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned also that the marijuana industry likes the fact that Colorado has water. Why is that?
These plants take a lot of water and a lot of energy. So not only are they poisoning our people, they're poisoning our environment, and they're stealing our resources. So from the Colorado Health Institute, Colorado ranks 43rd in the country for mental health, according to the 2018 index created by the Mental Health America. It has the 9th highest rate of suicide in the country. That's from the CDC. And it is the only state where residents have heavy consumers of 4 different substances. That includes alcohol, marijuana, opioids, and cocaine. And their quote is, "It's clear that behavioral health is a challenge in Colorado, yet many residents of the Centennial State do not get access to treatment they need." So they're promoting marijuana in our state, but they don't have treatment for it, or treatment for the other drugs too. A Denver forensic pathologist reports it is relatively common to find THC, marijuana, in blood after individuals either shoot or hang themselves, yet get in front of guns, or are shot in homicides. It is common to see dead children with THC in their hair. It is my impression that there is an appalling human carnage with this psychotropic drug. In the Christine Harms, from the director of the Colorado School Safety Resource Center, was quoted in the Denver Post saying, "We got sold that marijuana legalization was going to positively impact our schools, but we're not seeing a tremendous changes with our marijuana prevention programs, and our students are paying the price." Like I said, the suicide rate is increasing. In 2016, deaths due to suicide were common in Colorado more than any other state. 13 people out of every 100,000 in the United States died from suicide in 2016, but our rate in Colorado was 20 people per 100,000. In 2017, Colorado recorded 1,175 deaths due to suicide. That was the highest number in the state history. And it increased to 20.2 people per 100,000 between 2016 and 2017.
Wow.
And out of that 1,175 people, suicide is the most common in the age group 45 to 64. And men are 3 times as likely as women to die by suicide. And suicide is the leading cause of death in children from 10 to 24 years old. And there's the graph that proves it. That's the number one substance. It's the leading cause of death in our youth. And the number one drug they're testing positive for is marijuana. Now, all drugs will increase your risk of suicide. If you're depressed, you're having anxiety, if you're having a hard time, you're being bullied, there's trauma in your life, and you're self-medicating with any kind of drug, your chances are going to increase of committing suicide with any drug. The number one drug that increases that risk the most is cocaine. The number 2 drug is marijuana, a 7-fold increase. And nobody's doing anything about this.
Are people mixing drugs, marijuana with other stuff?
Absolutely, which just increases the risk more. So this is about protective factors and risk factors. So that is very, very common. Polysubstance use is very common. And people have their drug of choice. There's drugs, certain people are attracted to certain drugs the way they make them feel. So that is common. My son will tell you his drug of choice was marijuana and meth.
Okay.
So this brings us to what is psychosis. I do believe some of these people are experiencing psychosis. I'm not sure if that's what my son experienced that night after talking to him more and him describing more of his hallucinations. I do believe that, but I can't diagnose it. I'm not a medical professional. But I want people to know what psychosis is and how marijuana can lead to psychosis. It is the number one drug that can lead you there, and especially with this high-potency marijuana. So psychosis affects the mind where someone loses contact with reality. Sometimes we call it a psychotic episode or a psychotic break. During periods of psychosis, a person's thoughts and perceptions are disturbed, and the individual may have difficulty understanding what is real and what is not. Symptoms of psychosis are false beliefs. That was happening with my son. Hallucinations. That was happening with my son. And other behaviors with speech in inappropriate situations. So here's an advertisement. The marijuana industry will deny what I call, and the legal liars in your state will lie and say marijuana has nothing to do with psychosis, but they already know it does. I'm sure they experience it some themselves or they witness it. So here's an advertisement in a Denver magazine where it says, "Well, ever been so high you shredded a solo on a piece of pizza? We'll take you there." So they know exactly what's going on with this. When chronic psychosis is there, they diagnose schizophrenia if they're above the age of 18. There can be many risk factors that can lead to schizophrenia. Your genetics, the environment, brain chemistry. And then the legal liars try to bounce around and say that marijuana doesn't lead to that, but it does. Some studies have suggested that taking mind-altering drugs during teen years and young adulthood can increase the risk of schizophrenia. A growing body of evidence indicates that smoking marijuana increases the risk of psychotic incidences and the risk of ongoing psychotic experiences. The younger and the more frequent the use, the greater the risk. Another study was found that smoking marijuana led to an earlier onset of schizophrenia, often preceded the manifestation of the illness, meaning the marijuana came before the schizophrenia. The marijuana came before the psychosis. So this is about increasing risk factors with our children, with our community, and we're putting a full population at risk. When we talk about schizophrenia, there's a full spectrum of it. You can have somebody who's homicidal, suicidal, or you can have somebody who can respond very well to treatment and be a very protective member of society. So we need to make that clear. Some people lost in schizophrenia are often seen as a homeless population. They can't make the decisions. They can't regulate their emotions. They're hallucinating. They're hearing voices. And sometimes when they're offered services, they don't even know how to accept those services. And these people that we see on the streets are somebody's sons and daughters, their mothers and fathers. And I just want to bring light to that. This is a homeless man walking down the street in front of my house in Pueblo. We had a big late spring snowstorm. It was very cold. But he's someone. Our medical advisor at Mom Strong is Dr. Christine Miller. She's an expert at psychosis and schizophrenia. And she said up to 15% of marijuana users experience symptoms of psychosis from moderate strength pot. But when the cases of depression, anxiety, panic, suicide attempts, amotivational syndrome, and those with IQs affected are included, the total of negative psychiatric effects easily approaches 50%. That's a lot of people to put at risk.
Well, what would you consider to be moderate strength pot?
That's a very good question, and that's not definitive. That was something I would have to ask her. I know, like in some European countries, any marijuana that's over 15% is considered a hard drug. The way marijuana was made, that everybody says God made, was about 1 to 2% THC. So moderate, I think we'd have to ask the medical experts with that one.
Okay.
But
what they're selling is far beyond moderate.
Exactly. And one hit is unpredictable. When they try to compare marijuana to alcohol, there's no comparison at all, because you can take one sip of alcohol and not become psychotic, where you could take one hit off marijuana and your brain could be changed forever. And the more you hit on that, the bigger the risk is for you to be changed forever.
Okay.
When we talk to the state officials, elected officials, a lot of them don't believe us, like you mentioned before. And they always say, oh, there's something laced in that marijuana. There's something in that marijuana. What's in the marijuana is THC. It's a toxic brain-altering chemical. These are pictures of homeless people that I go and talk to, and I've made videos of. We have a homeless man in front of our Pueblo West Walmart asking to spare any weed. Our homeless population has increased. I can go over the stats, but we went from 2,444 people being served by Posada, our social service department that serves homeless families. That was in 2013 to 2016. They were serving 7,800 clients. And then our chief of police was saying that they've caused such an enormous weight on the social fabric of the city, so much so that I think the fabric is going to tear. And I think it is tearing. I know it is tearing. I've witnessed it myself. These are pictures of my community. This upper one of the car, I pulled into a Taco Bell parking lot to get some tacos, and I was walking inside, and one of the employees in the Taco Bell came out to this car and started smoking marijuana with her friend. The lights are on. They're not hiding their use or anything. They're blowing the smoke outside their car. And that's what happens when a community legalizes marijuana. This is a homeless man down here waking up in my neighborhood. It was a very cold night this night. He had it looked like he had 5 pairs of pants on and 5 coats on. Right across the street from the Taco Bell is a homeless man that sits underneath the Golden Corral here. We have families come in. We have cars like this that come in on the marijuana trek that they come to Colorado. This is me standing in the Sam's Club parking lot across the street from a marijuana shop and grow that's owned by Dr. Hassan. Dr. Hassan lives in the biggest, richest house in Pueblo. He has homes all over the world, and it's a big marble mansion off Elizabeth, and there's the homeless couple asking for help right across the street. On the other side of the marijuana shop is the river bottom, where we have hundreds and hundreds of people homeless down there, big camps. They polled the inmates in our prisons in Colorado, and 35% of them said they came for the marijuana. And these are people that are homeless and incarcerated. This is they put in more shops. We had like 27 already, and now they voted in 8 more shops in our town. And we are a small community. We're about the whole county is about 160,000. So this is a homeless couple in front of a marijuana shop that's going up. It's right by our friendly neighborhood Applebee's. And this is what it looks like now that it's done. And they're advertising their dabs and their syringes here. This is 500 milligrams of THC.
Wow. It looks like a nice building, very appealing.
Oh, yeah. And it's right on the main drag. You had talked about our marijuana overdoses, and I'm not sure if we can see the latest stats, but the latest stats just came out when Dr. Finn did the webinar. I don't think these were out yet, but 2017 showed even over 1,000 overdose deaths from drugs, and the majority of those were opioids. So here, the Colorado Health Institute quoted opioid deaths and legalized marijuana contrary to information that has been published. Opioid deaths in Colorado have increased 33% since legalization of marijuana in 2013. Prescription overdose deaths decreased slightly in 2015 and 2016, but increased to 357 in 2017. Heroin deaths increased by 93% from 2013 to 2016. These are people posting on Facebook to show what it's like to live in a legalized state. Driving and smoking marijuana is being reported. Marijuana is coming into my backyard and into my home. This is a marijuana bus. We get lots of marijuana buses. They call them cannabuses that come through our community. This is at the Southside Pueblo Walmart parking lot. I talked to this man for a little bit, and I want to show you, he's got all kinds of claims on his truck that aren't true. And he's talking to this girl on Facebook. I started following him on Facebook, and they're talking about marijuana overdoses, and she's talking about a doctor needs to be stripped of his board certifications. People do overdose on marijuana. They might not stop breathing because the receptor sites in the brain are less than the opioid sites, and they're not located in the part of the brain that regulates breathing. But people do end up on ventilators that are overdosing on marijuana. And overdoses on marijuana look like psychotic breaks, suicide, homicides, child abuse, and neglect. So the people that are going around saying people don't overdose on marijuana are what I call legal liars. Then they go on to say that this girl has 4 canna babies, and then Jack, who's with the bus, says, "Yeah, I have 1 canna baby," meaning that the mother smoked marijuana while she was pregnant with the babies. Unfortunately,
what's that do to the babies?
All kinds of stuff. It can do low birth weight. It can prime the brain for addiction and mental illness. They did a study, the University of Colorado, and they found that 70% of our marijuana stores, medical and recreational, were recommending high potency marijuana to pregnant women as a remedy to treat their morning sickness. That's 70% of the shops. So There's an organization called the Marijuana Accountability Organization, and they did a campaign called Don't Hurt Our Future Colorado Kids. Nobody's holding these marijuana shops responsible. There's no accountability. There's no fines. There's no criminal charges. And this industry said that they would not harm our children, but they're giving marijuana and recommending marijuana to pregnant women. They are impersonating medical professionals, and they are harming our children. So my mom and I, as people did in Denver too, hung these baby bibs on the marijuana shop to bring attention. We put a press release out that we were doing this, and of course no media showed up. So I started personally contacting them. I had 3 media outlets show up to interview me, and I only got one of them to put me on their 5 o'clock news.
Have you ever considered maybe filing, or maybe the folks that you work with, a class action lawsuit?
That's my dream. That's what I would love to have. I've talked to lawyers, and a lot of them tell me no. But a class action lawsuit is exactly what we need. The problem is the laws are in favor of the marijuana industry. But I do talk to lawyers, and I do try to gather people and see what we can do. And I pray that we can do something like that.
Okay.
The crime rate is increasing. In Pueblo, Colorado, we're 152% higher than the average of the whole state of Colorado. We're 174% higher than the national average. We average 21.32 daily crimes in Pueblo. You have a 1 out of 13 chance of becoming a victim of a crime in Pueblo. One of the major crimes we have is our cars are constantly stolen. When you're gassing up, when you're in the grocery store, you have to really watch what you do. And they're stealing our cars to traffic drugs and people. This is a picture outside of my work where I do physical therapy in Pueblo at a long-term care facility, a nursing home. And this is a truck that's been set on fire that was stolen, that was involved with some robberies the night before. And I showed up to work that morning. It was a Sunday morning, and my first patient was an elderly woman, and she said she was really scared of the fire in the field right next to the facility. And as you can see, the neighborhood behind it is a nice neighborhood. It's called Walking Stick. It's one of our nicer communities. And then up on the hill with the big building, that's getting into Colorado State University. They often set the cars on fire to get rid of the evidence. Our marijuana shops are robbed, just like convenience stores or alcohol shops. And then you can see this Dr. Orders was robbed one day, and you can see the sign with the little cartoon character that looks like a doctor.
In green.
In green, yeah. Dr. Randall probably showed you this picture because this occurred in her neighborhood. This is the DEA taking down a Cuban cartel in her neighborhood. I don't know if I can move this out of the way here. I want to read this to you. So here's a lady that posted on Facebook in Pueblo on October 23rd, 2017. She says, "I'm not even sure how to word this, but I'm so blank sick of things like this happening out here. Everyone thinks it's so great to have legal pot. Well, this is what you open the door to. We have 5 Cuban-owned grow houses in less than 2 miles. I can see 2 from my house. The last 6 months, we've had huge trash dumps on the road. We've had dead horses wrapped in tarps dumped on the road. This dead cow was dumped along our pasture. Never before in the 8 years I've lived here. The grow on the corner was abandoned because the guy was killed. I'm sick of it. Now all their trash, all their plastic and plywood is blowing all over in the fall wind storms. How much did one grow north of me and their actions cost taxpayers? 3 large vehicles, 5 county employees coming out every time to clean this mess. I'm trying to raise a family and operate a business in the middle of this. If there's a vote to repeal, I'm there." So,
why the dead animals?
It's from, well, I can't say for sure because I'm not involved in this, but the animals, can eat the plants, and they're full of pesticides and stuff. Some, we've had some animals. There was a horse that was reported that it was butchered to eat. I have read this quote and I have showed, especially the governor of Vermont, this, and they still allowed the legalization of marijuana. Politicians have been shown this,
And
and they
now Canada has
now
voted
Canada.
to
And
legalize.
Cory Gardner is a big one in our state that's protecting the marijuana industry and ignores all of this.
Okay.
And he's been highly educated by the professionals in my community, and he blatantly chooses to ignore what's happening. This is other pictures of marijuana busts. The two bottom ones are in Telluride, Colorado, that my friend sent me. The one on the top is actually me taking that picture. I'm standing on a property that people I love, and they have to smell dead skunk all the time. And this house is under surveillance because it's suspected of selling to the black market. So every home is a potential drug house that can fuel the black market. Sheriff Taylor, our sheriff in Pueblo, said on legalizing the black market, it has not killed the black market, Taylor said. It's exploded. The facts say marijuana that used to come from Mexico has really decreased. The DEA will tell you that. They don't need to bring it from Mexico anymore. They can grow it right here in Colorado. We are the epicenter. So the legalization of marijuana just changed the locations of the drug dealers and provided a front for them to hide behind.
But it's a legal front. Are the cartels using the laws of Colorado to promote their business?
Absolutely. That's why they're there. It's a joke to them. And they can't wait till other states can. That just means more locations for them. People will say, oh, once it's legalized in other states, it'll get better here in Colorado. It has not gotten better. Other states are legalizing. California is the worst of them all. I mean, that Humboldt County has the 15,000 illegal grows. What's happening is we are supplying the whole country and the whole world marijuana. We're going to be the marijuana capital.
But, you know, I had a conservative lawmaker tell me that, you know, we can learn from the mistakes that have been made in California and Colorado, and we can have tight regulations on marijuana, make sure it's, you know, within certain THC limits, and we'll make sure it's only for kids 21 and older. Wishful thinking?
Totally wishful thinking. You can't regulate drug dealers, period. We're living proof of that, and other states are living proof of that. And these people are already in your communities. You know, they're waiting like for Texas to legalize, and they have so much water. You know, they're just waiting. Unfortunately, we have to get to the root of the problem. We're in a cultural crisis. We need to quit making customers for these drug dealers, whether they want to label them legal or illegal. They're all drug dealers in my view. This is me last Christmas. I had just picked up my son to come home for 3 days at Christmas, and I went to the Sam's Club that's located across the street from the marijuana grow shop, and I was locked in Sam's Club because there was a psychotic man with a gun outside. This stuff like this happens all the time in Colorado. And then down the street, TJ Maxx was being held under gunpoint and robbed.
So you can, all the crime statistics appear to be, you know, increasing. The crime level is on the increase. But do you just feel less safe when you go to the store, when you go to a fast food restaurant? I mean, are you always just on edge?
Yeah, my son and I became very isolated in my community. We went from walking the dog around the neighborhood to not walking the dog around the neighborhood. We went from going to public outings to not going to public outings. It changed my home. It changed my way of life. It made me, I was never really interested in owning a gun, but it made me go take a gun class for gun safety. It's really that serious, and it's really that bad because it's so unpredictable, the behaviors. You know, some people might be okay on it, and other people will be completely out of their mind. Here is a man named Brad Fowler. He was killed 3 blocks away from me, 100 feet away from my parents' garage. He was growing marijuana and selling it to the illegal market. And 3 men came to buy marijuana from him, and they killed him, and he lay dead on the street at 9 a.m. on a Friday morning. May he rest in peace. We never had a homicide in my neighborhood before.
Wow. 9 a.m. on a Friday morning.
That's right, 9 a.m. on a Friday morning. This is another Friday at noon. This was a gang shooting and stolen cars, crash right in front of my house.
Looks like a nice neighborhood.
Very nice neighborhood. You can see here, there's a car behind here, and they came up and the pole is halfway gone. And the people that were shooting at each other in these cars ran off. I think they got one of them. Ran off in our neighborhood. This is my neighborhood. Let me take you on a little tour of this area here. Right here, the caregiver that was taking care of my mother-in-law who's disabled got her window shot out. You come down the street here. This home had 3 cars stolen in less than 3 months. You come down here, there was a man running after my car, a young man. He looked maybe 18, 19 years old, waving his arms erratically, followed me down my alley here where I was going to pull in my garage. I was scared, so I started recording him on my cell phone. He got mad at me for recording him, so he ran off. He ran off down the alleyway here and started yelling and screaming at people on the street and knocking on doors. He finally got to a house up here. The lady answered the door. I was following him in my car, and I had called the police at this point. She had a baby on her hip and a little toddler next to her. I was scared. The police showed up and told me I could go home. Later on, I came back and I knocked on her door, and I said, "What was that man saying?" She said, he just got out of the hospital, which is located 4 blocks north of us, Parkview Medical Center, and that Pueblo was going to blow up and he needed a ride out of Pueblo. When you come back here and come back up the street, this house right here was an illegal marijuana grow operation. They would hang marijuana in the backyard, and the alleyway that would come up this way, the cars could come up and down the alleyway and go out the back door and pick up their marijuana. When you come down the street here, there was a kid that was shot in the head here. The kid that shot him was a kid my son was associated with. Him and his family grow marijuana in their home. Now, the kid that was shot in the head was shot with a small gun, so he ended up being okay. When you come back down here, here's that alleyway, and here's my friend's home here. Next to the illegal marijuana grow. They have 3 small children. They would be playing in their backyard, and you can hear the testimonies of this family on my YouTube channel. And they would have to go inside because between this house and this house, smoking marijuana, the smoke was on their property. So they'd have to tell their kids to go inside. They couldn't play in the backyard. One day the mother came home and the strong smell of marijuana was inside their home. She thought somebody had broken in. There was nobody inside the home, and they came to realize that the swamp cooler had drawn in the marijuana smoke. So they got to the point where they wouldn't even cool their house because they didn't want their children breathing in marijuana smoke. When you come back down here, this little white house here was a home invasion to steal marijuana at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. If you go to a broader picture, here's my house here, and you go all the way down 3 blocks right here. This is where Mr. Fowler was killed. That's just in my little radius. There's been more crime than that. Oh, I didn't even tell you. The house that was, let me go back. This house right here, the SWAT team shut down this whole road here because there was a psychotic woman with a gun in this house. So this is my house, and all that just happened since the legalization of marijuana. That's the only thing I know about that's been publicly said.
You give out your address so freely, I'm assuming the marijuana industry knows where you live. So
well, they've stolen my yard signs and stuff. They have Facebook pages to harass me. So when people say marijuana, no one dies for marijuana, they're a legal liar. This is Levi Ponge. He was only 19 years old. He got a marijuana cookie. He was supposed to eat a sixth of the cookie. I don't know who could eat a sixth of a cookie. He ended up eating the whole thing, and he was erratic, pulling things off the wall, and he jumped to his death off a balcony in Denver, Colorado. This is Richard Kirk. He ate a marijuana edible. His wife was on the phone asking for help, saying her husband was out of control. That's Christine Kirk. And he shot his wife, Christine Kirk, and she died. So they had 3 boys. And this day that Richard Kirk shot his wife, the kids lost both their parents because she is deceased, and he will spend the rest of his life in prison. This is Luke Goodman. He killed himself after consuming a marijuana edible, and his mom blames the marijuana edible for his suicide, and I would support her on that. This is Brant Clark. He was 17 years old. He had a major psychotic break that was so intense that he required emergency care at 2 hospitals within 3 days. He told the doctor, marijuana really messed me up. 3 weeks later, he took his own life, and in his suicide note, he put, "Sorry for what I've done. I wasn't thinking the night I smoked myself out." He told his mom and the doctors that he just had thoughts of paranoia he just couldn't shake. This is Daniel Horace. I'm sorry, it gets very emotional because nobody gives these people a voice. This is Daniel Horace. He was 18 years old in Brighton, Colorado. He smoked a bunch of marijuana, and he grabbed a knife and stabbed himself 20 times.
Oh my.
Stabbed himself in the heart. And his death was ruled a suicide with marijuana intoxication as a significant condition. His sister, Erica, said, "It's not harmless. It can kill people. And most people don't see that." She said, "I lost my brother to it," meaning marijuana. Mom Strong has made a quilt. Marijuana kills in a variety of ways: psychosis, suicide, DUIs. It's a gateway drug and a companion drug. And like we talked about, marijuana overdoses exist. And we would like to point out that legalization of marijuana is in parallel with the opioid epidemic. It is not helping the opioid epidemic. This is Shane Robinson. His mother is the founder of Mom Strong. Shane unfortunately started using medical marijuana after a knee surgery, and he hallucinated. He was in and out of psychotic breaks, and he ended up killing himself at the age of 25. His mom suggested that his son get help for drug rehab, and the therapist said, "Your son's not a drug addict. He just smoked pot." So it's not just the teenagers that are affected. So she founded Mom Strong. And then the co-founder is Sally Schindel. Her son, Andy Zorn, was 31 when he took his life. He was in and out of behavioral health hospitals. And in his suicide note, he put, "My soul's already dead. Marijuana killed my soul and ruined my brain." They asked me to be the third mom to give hope. My son is still alive. Citizens for a Healthy Pueblo formed in my community of Pueblo, Colorado. I wasn't the only family suffering. I wasn't the only one. And we found out that 72.2% of Colorado towns and cities at that point said no to retail marijuana, so we wanted that option to push them out because we believe the health and safety of our community is more important than the marijuana industry. 2 moms in Pueblo West started this. They're like heroes, angels to me. We had 258 out of our 300 medical professionals support this petition, support this ballot initiative, and we still lost. We are covering our faces while we're holding up signs. We would not put yard signs in our yards because we would be harassed. That's just the reality. People would blow pot smoke in my face while I was collecting signatures. They would spit at me. But it just tells you a lot that these outside people came in and we still lost the ballot initiative. So don't allow this industry into your community. It'll be very hard to get it out. Moving back on to my son relapsed again. And he chose to go to marijuana because he thought it was a safer drug. At that time, we were discharged from social services. We had 2 different home therapists, and he had his 3-month stay in a residential treatment program. This time he would be gone for days. I would find him in front of a gas station about a half-mile away from my house, begging for food and water, running with homeless people. I had a family that was harboring him and giving him marijuana. Um, I had walked away from my job at this point because looking for treatment became my full-time job, and I couldn't trust him to be alone with my other son. So I walked away from my career. There was a time he was gone for 3 days. He came back. I took him to the ER. He tested positive for marijuana only, and they did a medical intervention with him. I had found a treatment center in Utah that was going to accept him. So he decided, yes, he does need help. He accepted the help, and I took him home. He was vomiting up to 7 times a day, taking long, hot showers. He was very sick. He was very thin at this point, only testing positive for marijuana. I went and bought him the ranching clothes for the treatment center. It was a working cattle ranch. And the night before we were supposed to leave, which was the very next day, the executive director from that treatment center told me I could not bring him unless I had $36,000, even though I had private insurance. I had $200 in my checking account at that point. We were living off my husband's income. As soon as I couldn't take him, and as soon as my son started feeling better, he was back on the streets. He was gone for 5 days at one point, came back home. I called the police. They called social services. So social services told them that they did everything to help my family. That was the parents' responsibility. As you can see, I could not find him more treatment. I networked with a lot of people at this point, and one of the ladies I networked with gave me a phone number of a consultant. And this young man who was in long-term recovery told me I needed a dual diagnosis treatment center for my son because he won't get treatment for marijuana abuse. And he found a place in San Diego, California, where he went there. And this is me visiting my son in that residential treatment program. I was able to come visit him and take him out for 3 hours, And these were very good moments where I felt like I had my son back. You can see he's very healthy looking. He's got muscles. He was working out very well in the treatment program. His skin was clear. He was looking good, and we were enjoying our time together. Him chasing crabs, swimming in the ocean. There were seals there, watching the sunset. It was a beautiful time. I knew I was not going to bring my son back to Pueblo, Colorado. So I was very involved with the Pueblo community, going to the Heroin Task Force Committee, and they told me about Archway Academy in Houston, Texas. It's a recovery high school. I called Archway. I spoke to the principal, Sasha McLean, and she guided me and told me about alternative peer groups, and Dr. Annette Edens, who wrote a book called Monsters to Miracles that I recommend for every family to read, even if your child doesn't have a substance abuse problem. After I read that book, I started gaining confidence about being a mom again, and we started our path to true recovery. So I did not bring my son back to Colorado. I took him straight to Houston, Texas, and that was August of 2016. He was 16 years old at this time. This all started when he was 14. That was 2 years ago, and he's been in Houston ever since. Houston is a very special place. They have a whole community of recovery. So he's in an intensive outpatient program that he's been in for 2 years with. He's in the alternative peer groups. He's in an adventure learning program. He lives with host families. These families open their homes to him. They're called winning families because the parents have done their recovery and their work, and they're so involved with the program that they have been the miracle that we needed. And this past July, I had the choice, again, am I going to bring my son back to Colorado, or what am I going to do? He's 18 years old now. And I decided I had enough of Pueblo. And I took my younger son and I moved to Houston, Texas this past July. I live here now. So that residence I showed you with my address, I don't live there anymore. So I'm more bold about that.
Sure. So yours is not a unique story, unfortunately. Do you have a Dear Marijuana Industry letter that you would like to tell them? Uh, do you have some advice for lawmakers here in Illinois about the decision on whether or not to legalize today's high potency marijuana?
Well, of course, I would tell them not to do it. Unfortunately, they don't listen. I approached the marijuana industry in my community right when I found out what a dab was and stuff, um, and asked them why they make these products and why they make the candies. And I was laughed at and harassed. But my letter to them and to your lawmakers would be, don't allow this industry into your state. Don't allow this industry into your communities. They will prey upon the children, and they will destroy families. They will destroy communities. And we are in the biggest addiction, mental health crisis of our country. This is the last thing we need. We need to pass laws for drug prevention and drug recovery. They need to come study the Houston recovery model, and you can watch the documentary Generation Found to learn more about that. No matter what, the doctors and I and several other people continue to speak out about the harms that the marijuana industry has caused us. The doctors started this ad, a public service announcement, this past 420 holiday, the marijuana industry holiday. Used their own money, and then doctors across the country got involved with this, and we put this ad in many newspapers throughout the country. Very honored to work with these people. When people want to know the true impact of marijuana, they say, who do you go see? And they say, go see Aubree Adams in Pueblo, Colorado. I've been in several documentaries, but this one by far is the best, Chronic State. Everybody needs to watch it. Every lawmaker, every child, every parent needs to watch it. It shows the true impact of marijuana.
And where do folks go to view that?
Online. It's free online. Just put in Chronic State documentary and you can view it. I think you guys have it on your website too. I won't get into this story, but my friend took a CBD product, hallucinated, and she also lost her daughter to suicide. And her daughter was recommended marijuana to treat her depression. Her daughter was being bullied at school. If you could tell your lawmakers, if you legalize marijuana, this is what you have to look forward to. Signs to say don't bring your marijuana in hospitals and in the health departments. I don't necessarily want people to go to jail for marijuana, but there needs to be some accountability and some education. Without accountability, there's no opportunity for recovery. You cannot block somebody's chance to get sober. You need to ask yourself, what part do you play? So the lawmakers that are supporting this play a huge role in this, an enabling role. And they're blocking people's chances of getting better by enabling them and telling them this is okay. We also need to know that the Drug Policy Alliance is behind this movement, and they don't just want to legalize marijuana, they want to legalize all drugs. So Illinois needs to stop this now. Because of the change in culture, we need to teach our kids to only take food, lotion, drinks, and gums from their parents or people they trust. As there was a wedding in California that a lot of people were exposed to marijuana and became very sick. You need to start teaching them young. You need to role play and have code words for when they're in a bad situation with their peers that they can call their parents and get help. You need to teach them to call for help when a friend is unresponsive, no matter what type of drug they've taken, that they need to know that they're not going to get in trouble to call for help. If somebody's not waking up, it's not a funny situation. It means they're overdosing. And a lot of people have the not my child syndrome like I did. Don't minimize marijuana use. Take it seriously and do everything you can to block your child from having access to marijuana or any drug. Our country has developed drug biases, and that's what happens to parents that I know and parents like me when we tell our stories of how marijuana harmed our children or led to their death. People laugh at us and say and tell us we don't matter, that we should quit speaking out because only the ones that are dying from heroin matter. And then I tell them how my son went on to meth and heroin, or I tell them about another family member that lost their child to an overdose. And these drug biases is like saying the only breast cancer victims matter over skin cancer victims. It's ridiculous. It's a bias. This is my message to your lawmakers. I want to tell them this. People don't die from the disease of addiction. They die from the disease of enabling. They die from the disease of stigma. Excuse me. They die from the disease of denial. They die from the disease of politics, which leads to lack of prevention and treatment. They die because of the lack of education. They die from the disease of self-entitlement, the disease of drug promotion and normalization and commercialization. They die from the charade that freedom to use and the right to use leads actually to enslavement. They die from pro-pot propaganda and our cultural crisis that says a little pot won't hurt you. So that is my message to your lawmakers.
Aubree, thank you so much for sharing with us. Your passion comes through, and our prayers are with you and your son. Let's hope he has a full and complete recovery, and that other kids don't get addicted to marijuana and other drugs. We need to advise our state lawmakers to vote no on marijuana. And Aubree, what should voters be telling their lawmakers about this?
Don't let drugs win the war on drugs.
Okay.
We need to pick public health and safety. We don't want to congratulate more drugs for winning the war on drugs. It's not the solution. That's enabling.
All right.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm sorry I got emotional at the end.
Well, that's quite all right.
I
And
really appreciate
we
that.
understand. It is emotional because you're feeling the impact of what this drug is doing firsthand. So, Aubree Adams, thank you. God bless you. She is affiliated with Moms Strong, Parents Opposed to Pot, and she encourages you to vote, or rather view the video on YouTube, Chronic State. It's a documentary. And thank you again, Aubree, and God bless you.
So thank you very much. God bless you too.
And thanks for viewing this edition of NoWeedIllinois.com. Remember, please be in contact with your state lawmakers. Kindly ask them to vote no on marijuana. A vote could be coming in January. Here's the phone number for lawmaker information. It's 217-782-2000. Till next time, God bless.